Okay, so tonight Mitzvahs Loisa says part 2, Mitzvahs 123 through 244, right? All right. Okay, page 92 in that Rambam. Continuing the negative mitzvahs, Loisa says the thou shalt nots. And in your Rambam it's page 68. All right. So right in the smack in the middle of the topic of the mitzvahs of Korban Pesach, yeah?
Okay, let's see if that's true.
Yesterday, the last mitzvah we finished off was not to break a bone of the Korban Pesach. Sheni. Kuf Chav Gimel 123. Not to remove any meat from the Korban Pesach from the group, and how to define the group and its borders. We'll learn. It says do not remove from the house or whatever context. If you're doing it in the park, right, it's not a house, but we'll see how that's defined. Kuf Chav Dalet.
You did it in the park?
It's saying Indian. So the asas b'shirei menachos chametz, not to let any of the after you offer up on the mizbeach the parts, the kmitza, whatever goes in the mizbeach, whatever remains by the person should not become allowed to become chametz. Remember, it says leisafa chametz chelkav, not let the portion become chametz.
What do? You have to make sure it burns before.
Well, you have to make sure you eat it before, usually. Yeah. Kuf chafei shulachol b'sar pesach no mavushol.
No, but you bought before.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the carbon. No, I love the Korban Pesach, right? In general, right? That's in general speaking of the concept of grain karbanis, and therefore there are whatever after you put the kmitza on the mizbeach, the rest has to be burnt. It's funny that I'm put this in the halachas of Pesach, even though it's not Pesach related, but it's chametz and matzah related. Okay, kuf chafei shleilachol b'sar pesach no mavushol. Do not eat the meat in the Korban Pesach medium rare or cooked in water. It has to be roasted dafke. It says, Jews are notorious, right? By the fancy schmancy restaurants, you order $1,000 steak, you want it well done. And we're just like, these people don't know how to eat meat. You have to. Shemetz, you have more hasagas than most of us. Do not eat it from medium rare or cooked in water. Kuf chavav. Do not allow the Korban Pesach to be eaten by a ger, even if he's a ger teishav, a guy who's allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael. He's still not a yid. Shemet says teishav sachal a resident or a hired person, meaning even if he's working for a yid, he's hired help. A live-in nanny, that can have in South Africa, not allowed. Kuf chav zayin shalayachol. Even though under the jurisdiction of a yid, he cannot not eat from the Korban Pesach or hekesh b'chlal. Kuf chav zayin shalayachol Pesach. A person without a bris milah may not eat from the Korban Pesach, even though it's not his fault. He had 3 brothers before him, Nebuchadnezzar died from bris milah. 2, even 2, right? Exactly. Shemet says, any uncircumcised person may not eat from it. We may not feed the meat. That was the mitzvah is addressed to the frum yid, not probably. So, but I don't see you. Don't worry. So, not to feed the meat of the Korban Pesach to a yid who is converted to Avodah Zarah. Now, the mitzvah is not if a person worships Avodah Zarah, he shouldn't eat the Korban Pesach. The mitzvah is not addressed to him because he not cares. Shemet says, "Call any foreigner may not eat from it." Pashut pshat in the pasuk is a foreigner is a goy. Kalemar, we learned the pasuk to say, "Yisol shenilav of nei necha," a yid who has become attached, assimilated to the foreign people. He serves idols like them. He may not eat from the Korban Pesach.
Some people think that Chabadniks should eat from it.
Why?
They think they're
so that's their problem. A person should not. Who became tamei should not eat hekesh b'chlal. It says a person who eats from the meat of the korban shlamim, if he's tamei, not good. If the korban itself becomes tamei, you can't eat it either. Even though you're Torah, it says the flesh touches any impurity, you're not to be eaten. Not to eat any meat that's been left over after the expiration date for when you're allowed to eat that korban, depending on what kind of korban it is. It says a person eats it, he bears his sin. That soul is cut off, etc. Not to eat pigul, which means a korban that the kohen did, one of the 4 important avodas, or the person, the sheichet, which is not lavdafka kohen, right? The person received the blood, walked into the mizbech or sprinkled it, had it with the kavanah in mind to do something in the korban related after the appropriate time. That's called pigul. Rashi and Chumash holds you. Remember, that it has to actually articulate it verbally, but the Ram doesn't say that. Okay, it's Rashi and Devarim. In any event, so a person has that wrong machshava. It's called pigul, which means fadreit. Mixed up. It says I believe so.
I think
Distorted. I think that's what Rashi Chumash says. Okay. A kitzer. It says the person who offers it, he's not considered, doesn't count. It's pigul, and it should not be counted. A person who's not a kohen may not eat teruma. It says any foreigner may not eat kodesh. Here, the word holy refers to the truma, the tithe that's given to the kohen, which includes bikurim, challah, truma, trumas meiser, etc. A person, even if he's the resident tenant by a kohen, or a ben bias, a kohen adopts an orphan, so you might think he's a member of the household. He's almost like a slave of a kohen could eat truma. So he's like member of the household. The answer is no. There's a special avera not to allow him to eat truma. It says even the resident or the resident tenant of a kohen and his a hired worker may not eat from it. A person who's not have a bris. Yeah, a person does not have a bris, a kohen who does not have a bris, may not eat truma. And this applies to other kachim, a kavachimer, right? We learn the fact that a person, it's funny, the Rambam puts, he says that a person not a bris milah cannot eat truma. This also applies, he can't eat kachim, which is a higher level of kedusha than truma. How do we know that? So the Rambam tells us what's the pasuk. So the pasuk is, when we learn it from the Gezerah Shava, that was the man in the Gezerah Shava. We learn it from the Korban Pesach Gezerah Shava. We said by a Korban Pesach, a person that does not have a bris, he can't eat it. As we said in Mitzvah Kuf Chav Zayin, the pasuk said, so we learn that Gezerah Shava, Korban Pesach to all kachim. And we learn Halacha Mishnah Sinai is not considered something that's derived from the rules of learning the psukim. Medivrei Sefer, as the Rambam calls it. Which doesn't mean that Rabbanan prove Hashem. It means like it's derived from the pasuk instead of being learned before the pasuk. It's considered an actual deradais. The seder.
You know that behema, you're allowed to feed a behema, you're allowed to feed your
yeah, right. Because that's considered under the property of the kohen.
No.
But an adopted child or a tenant by the kohen, a ben bias. You know, it's a guy in Nebuchadnezzar 770 you adopted. He comes to you every 3 times for meals. That's not good enough. Yeah. So here the Rambam. It's funny. The Rambam does not tell us this by Mitzvah Kuf Zayin. Kuf Lamed Hey, where the mitzvah says beferish that an oral cannot eat truma. Then he says, and we learn Gezerah Shava from the mitzvah of Kuf Chav Zayin, the pasuk of the Gezerah Shava. All right. Kuf Lamed Vav. Shalach al Kaim would probably be a fascinating limud if we would learn Sefer Mitzvahs while we're learning this. The Rambam has differences in Sefer Mitzvahs and the Ad Chazaka, how he learns what from which psukim. All right. Kuf Lamed Vav. Shalach al Kaim Tamid Truma. A Kain who's Tamid may not eat truma. Shema Yishmiz. Ah. No, we said kachim. Here it says mikani truma. Shema it says ish mizat. Well, here it says mizaracha, but the pasuk pasha is supposed to say mizara aharin, but here it says mizara aharin. The it's a mistake. Okay, the Shema ish mizara aharin kachim layocha. A person in the sense of aharin can not eat it, but actually, okay, fine. Dama's boring to the psukim maybe. A woman who's a halala, which means she had a relationship in a way that disqualifies her specifically regarding kahuna. She may not eat kodesh loy truma v'leichaz of a sheikh. She can't eat the things that a kohen is normally allowed to eat, even though she may be the daughter of a kohen, right? But if she becomes disqualified for, as we'll see, by having the wrong relation with the wrong person, she's not allowed to eat kodesh or truma or the special chaz of a sheikh, which is the part of the carbon taida that's given to a kohen. Not allowed. Shem it says bas kohen kishi the if a bas kohen marries a foreigner, etc. Okay. Kuflamed ches shlei toichal min chas kohen. Now a kohen who brings a grain offering. Normally you take a kmitza, you put it in the mizbeach, and the rest you eat. Comes to a kohen, there's a din, there's no kmitza. The whole thing goes in the mizbeach. Shenamar it says v'chol min chas kohen, any carbon belongs to a kohen. Kol sila shachot should be totally consumed, not eaten. That's what the whole shaila. What if the wife of a kohen becomes a soita? She has to bring the special carbon of a soita. So is it his carbon? Is it her carbon? Do you burn in the mizbeach? Do you not? That's okay. Yeah, the Gemara talks about it. When you have a carbon chatas, that the blood is sprinkled on the inner mizbeach, like a unique kind of carbon chatas. Unlike a regular carbon chatas, whose blood goes in the outer mizbeach, none of this carbon chatas gets eaten. The Shema it says v'chol chatas any carbon chatas that the blood is brought inside the heichel. Those carbonas are burned completely outside the special carbonas, the ones that are for Yom Kippur and the ones that are for carbonas for the tzibur and for if the Beis Sanhedrin makes a mistake. Anytime a carbon is disqualified because somebody put a mum on but intentionally, we learned yesterday there's a lois say of doing that. Now we learned there's a lois say of eating from that carbon. To eat from it. It says, do not eat any disgusting thing. What is this disgusting thing? We learn by tradition. Is speaking about something which was put a mum intentionally, right? So you're now going to think, very good, I'll shech and I'll eat it. No, we're going to learn this. Yeah, now I'll do that.
We paid it before.
Sorry, 1 second. Right. So wait, what do you do with it? We'll see. Can you not shecht it? I'm trying to remember now. You're not use it as a carbon. Even I think the word is even if it's offered as a carbon, now eat from it. No, 1 second. Sorry. Even if it's no. So what do you do with it? If you paid it. Thank you. Right. You have to pay it. Correct. Since b'shas you were makdish it was a good carbon, and then the mum was inflicted afterwards. You can't shecht it needed. You have to first be paid it. Right. Okay. Kufim min hey. Yeah, I believe that's true. I'm not found. Okay, the meiser sheni, the second meiser of grain, you should not eat it outside Yerushalayim. Obviously, only in Yerushalayim. Shem, it says, do not eat it in your gates outside Yerushalayim. Do not eat the meiser sheni of wine outside Yerushalayim. Shem, it says to of your wine.
Why didn't we buy it? I'm not sure.
Oh, you could, but that's not meiser sheni anymore. Fine. We're saying if you're not paid it. Yeah. Kufim gimel shloilach ma'aser sheni shal yitzor chut shlam. Do not eat ma'aser sheni of oil after shlam. Shem, it says yitzarach v'yitzarcha. 3 separate lavin, even though it's the same concept. Kufim dal shloilach b'char tamim chut shlam. Not to eat the meat of a firstborn animal outside your shlam has to be bought as a carbon. Right? Shem, it says do not eat it. You have has to be. In other words, it says regarding ma'aser sheni, right? Eating Yerushalayim. Then it says regarding the b'char, the same thing. Therefore, we learn it cannot be eaten outside Yerushalayim. You're not eat the meat anywhere outside the Azor. It says you can't eat your flock and your cattle. It's outside of anywhere you want in your gates. So we learned that this pasuk, this when it's saying you can't eat wherever you want in your gates, is talking about eating the carbon of the chatas or carbon asham. A kohen is eating it outside the azora. The Har Bayis, let's say, because anytime you're talking about eating something outside of its appropriate boundaries, whether that's the Azara, whether that's Yerushalayim, so the Pasuk references is in your gates, meaning stamazah in your living room, as opposed to the appropriate place. So even though the same exact lashon in one pasuk is used b'sharecha in your gates, not in Yerushalayim, that same lashon can mean in your gates, in Yerushalayim, but outside the Azar. Not to eat the meat ever of a carbon oila. You burn the mizbeach completely. Shem, it says you're not allowed to eat it. And it says and your kabbanis that you vow. In other words, the Rambam is not quoting the whole pasuk. Pasuk says leisuchal, right, and then continues under ashatider and your kabbanis. That I'm not sure why it's in Sefer Gomer. I believe the pasuk is not quoted here in fully. By you it says it's the such of a Gomer or just like oh, it's a Gomer. Okay, good. So by us it's of Gomer. And your kabbanis that you pledge. Meaning you cannot eat the kabbanis that you pledge. What kabbanis do you usually pledge when you say pledge a voluntary carbon? It could be a shlomim, but normally it's an oila. Not only the general the isser of eating the meat of a carbon oila, don't benefit from karbanis b'chlal, from hektish b'chlal. But you're not allowed to benefit. If you do, you're over what's called milah and misappropriating, misusing hektish. That's the concept of milah. Kufim Zayin. Now allowed to eat from the meat of a carbon of a kachim kalim before they sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. Shem now you'll be able to eat from the karbonis. And you're pledging karbonis. Meaning you're not allowed to eat from the blood of the karbonis before the blood has been sprinkled on the mizbeach. Kufim Ches. There's a special another lav not to eat from the meat of a kachi kadashim. If you are not a kohen, only kahanim can eat for them. It says a foreigner cannot eat it because it's holy. Now a kachim kalim, sometimes a non-kohen could eat. Often every kachim kalim a non-kohen could eat except for the chur. So mashein kachim kadashim is only for kahanim. Kachim kalim a kohen could give to his wife, right, to his slave. Kufim teshleichol kohen b'kudim kohen manacha ba'azada. The kohen is not even from the bikudim, the first foods, before you put it down in the azara. That's where that's the thing you have to do to it before you can eat it. Before the kohen can eat it. Shemet says again the same concept. You're not able to eat from elevated gifts, right? I believe that person delivers, etc. Kuf, that's recording. Kuf nun. Personality ma'aser sheni if they're tamei. Even in Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to eat it. Unless you first redeems it. Now you're not supposed to do ma'aser sheni in Yerushalayim, mind you. That's another story. Okay, we'll see how that's done. if the person becomes tummy. Shemet says, I did not consume it in a state of tumah. Now, if you're tummy, you cannot eat Ma'aser Sheni. To become tar, what do you have to do? You go to the mikvah. You don't have to wait till the sun sets. That's the Ma'aser Sheni, we're much more makel. What else can you do if you went to the mikveh and the sun didn't set yet? You can eat Ma'aser Sheni, paraduma, right? Paraduma, you're allowed to involve paraduma. That's the chiddush. And the Tzdukim said no. And that's what the Chazal would dafka take the guy who's doing paraduma, take a sheretz, slap it on his head, then have him go to the mikveh, and right there afterwards do the paraduma. But because also you're allowed to do paraduma in a state of quasi tumah, when truma, for example, you're not allowed to eat, they had all kinds of chumas they had to apply, so people shouldn't get the wrong idea. All right. Kufrin Aleph. Shalechol bas Ma'aser Sheni baninu is a person not eat Ma'aser Sheni or any kasher for that matter if he's in an acute state of mourning rachmana litzlan, means he lost an immediate relative, parent, child, sibling, spouse, and they have not been buried yet. Shemet says, I have not eaten from a state of aninus. Kufrin Dalit Numbeis Shalachitzi dam Ma'aser Sheni b'shar devarim Shemet mechila, not to use Ma'aser Sheni money. In other words, when you take the money you redeem Ma'aser Sheni, that money should be used to buy when you travel to Yerushalayim. Buy food, go to the restaurant, enjoy yourself. You're not allowed to use it to do something which is not food related, or drink related. It says, I have not used the money for the purposes of death. What does that mean? Doesn't mean you just didn't buy an oren or tachrichin. The pasuk saying the satam and anything which is not necessary to sustain the body, keep you alive, meaning bodily comforts, eating, drinking, or sicha, smearing, right? Those are. This is the Rambam's chiddush in that pasuk. Kuf nun gimel. Tevel nati tevel. What is tevel? Tevel is that which grows in the ground. Chayaves b'truma ma'aser, which you have to separate the appropriate separation truma ma'aser. Shalayitzim menu truma Hashem. You did not separate truma. That's called tevel. You should not profane the holiness of the Jewish people that they lift up to Hashem. Things that are meant to be raised up for Hashem, separated for Hashem, because you're supposed to separate truma from them, which according to Rambam is. It's not just grain, which is grain, wine, oil, and according to Rambam, I believe also vegetables, certain types of greens, other things. Okay. Anyway, don't profane them by eating them in a state of tevel without separating the appropriate truma or trumas ma'aser, mind you. Not to separate truma before bikurim. Bikurim comes first, then comes truma. Don't separate ma'aser from truma. First comes truma, then comes ma'aser. There's a seder. There's an order. Don't separate ma'aser from ma'aser. And do not. You do it in order. Bikurim is step one. V'achach truma v'gadel, then the primary truma. V'achach ma'aser, then afterwards the ma'aser. V'achach ma'aser, then ma'aser sheni. Mind you, whether the Levi separates his truma from his ma'aser before you separate your ma'aser sheni or not is irrelevant. Once you give it to him, it's his business. He could do it before, he could do it after you. It's not negeya. But the point is that you, with your two ma'asers, have to be in order. It says your fullness of your grain and the macha, meaning your ripening produce. Yeah. Or demacha, your that which grows by you. Do not delay it. Kalayra means to say not just don't delay it past a certain date in terms of when there's a chiyuv, because in Pasha there's no date. There's also a mitzvah to keep, once you separate it, give it to the kohen eventually before a certain time. We'll learn. But here it's saying don't delay it past the proper time by mixing the order. Don't delay when you bring a carbon that you place to Hashem. Nadar is you say Harei alai oila. Nadav is you say Harei zu oil, this animal here. So whichever way it is, you shouldn't delay it past. We'll learn when the expiration date for that is. It says basically the next yontif. Don't delay your pledge, paying it up. Don't come up to the Beis Hamikdash and show yourself without a carbon on yontif. It says do not come, do not see my face empty-handed. A person says, this is also for me, makes a nether, right? These grapes are also for me. He shouldn't transgress that by eating them. It says, he should not profane his words. A kohen may not marry a woman who is defined as a zayna. Now, a woman could be, theoretically, a professional prostitute, and not be halachically a zayna. A zayna, Ram is going to tell us what it means. She had a relationship with a certain type of person she's not allowed to marry. That's a zayna. But let's say a woman who does what I just mentioned earlier, but she was never with a person she couldn't marry. She's not a zayna al pidin, technically speaking. Okay, Shemet says actually a woman who's a zaina halala. A halala is as we'll see in Kufan Test. Halala is dafka a woman who had a problematic relation with a kohen because of who she was. With Yisrael wouldn't be a problem. It was because it was a kohen who she was the problem. That makes her into a halala. A woman is with a goy. Why is it a problem? Probably any Jewish woman, let's say. Mashenkin, a grusha is with a almana with a kohen gadol. That's a problem dafka because of the kuna status. So that makes her a halala. Shemet says a halala is a kohen cannot marry halala. Kuf Samach. Shulikach Garusha Kohen may not marry a divorcee. It says a woman divorced from her husband. She Kohen may not take. Kuf Samachal Shulikach Kohen Gadol Mono Kohen Gadol may not marry a widow. It says a month even she's not divorced. If Shem Mono Garusha of Cholas and Kohen Gadol cannot take. Oh, he adds a widow by a Kohen Gadol, a widow or a divorcee or a profane woman, a Chalala or a Zaina. I said he can't take them. Kuf Samach Beishala Yibel Kohen Gadol Mono. If you like Kedushin, there's an issue that Kohen Gadol having with a widow even if there's no marriage involved. There's also a lav. Because by doing so he makes you into a halala. Shemet says he's not allowed to profane his descendants, his seed, his offspring. So not just his offspring, there's an issue on the Kohen Gadol to profane, if you will, a woman by having relations with her in this context. So the Kohen is not allowed to enter the Beis Hamikdash overgrown hair, which means he'll learn the haircut in the past 30 days. Shemet says, did not let your hair go long. He cannot come into the Kohen, cannot come into the Beis Hamikdash, do the avodah, or any purpose for that matter, with torn clothing. Shemet says, do not tear your garments. That's by Aaron. Sorry, that's by, the fact that by Aaron's children, Hashem tells him not to do these things, especially we learn by there's a special, by Kahanim is generally speaking out loud. I think that's 1 second. Sorry, is that correct? Is this possible by Aaron's children? I don't remember. Okay. Kuf Samach Hey. The Kohen is not allowed to leave the Azar, the temple courtyard during the Avodah. It says Pesach HaMayid did not leave Pesach HaMayid. Kuf Samach Vov, you tell me Kohen Hedyet, the Shah Mesim, regular Kohen, standard Kohen may not become Tomei to mess. For a random mess. It says never should not become tummy for a corpse, for a soul. Now, for his relatives, he's allowed to regular kohen, but for a kohen gadol, even for his relatives, not allowed to. It says for his parents, for his father's mother, he cannot become tummy. So how could the Eibush bury Moshe Rabbeinu? It says that Keichem Kohen. Right, so there was a sikh about it. Kuf Samachesh Kohen gadol imames tachas tikra, but you says tachas tikra. Okay, a kohen may not go. Besides the issue of becoming tamei, there's an issue of the kohen gadol entering with a mess under the same roof and in the same oil shem. It says, "V'alkol nafshes meis liyavi." You cannot come into any corpse. Kol kachlam piashmulim. By tradition, shuchay v'chol b'yavi v'chay b'tamah. It's two separate lavim. There's a general lav of him becoming tamei from a corpse of a kohen gadol. There's also an independent lav for the kohen gadol to become tamei dafka by going into the same structure, the same oil as a corpse. Kuf Samachta Shavit Levi may not take a portion in Eretz Yisrael like everyone else. They have to have scattered cities, as we'll learn. Now I'll take a portion of the spoils of war. Mind you, they fought in the war with Pashtus. Ram learns to us about a kohen. If the kohen married a grusha, he's allowed to go back to the macham when the kohen Mishloach Macham makes his announcements. Right, whoever got married this year, go back, don't fight. So we say the kohen married a grusha, is he included or not? So the kahanim and Shevet Levi were part of the war. The Pashtus, the Chesed Mechamas Mitzvah over here, but they were not allowed to take part in the spoils of war. Shenemar, it says the Kahanim Levim should have a portion in the inheritance, but meaning Chelek Benachla. Nachla is inheritance in the land. Chelek means a portion in the spoils of war. A person, a Jew, is not allowed to make a bald spot in the mourning process when you're mourning for a lost loved one. Shem, it says do not place a bald spot between your eyes or any on your body for that matter is really allowed for a dead one. Not to eat impure animals, unkosher animals, as we call them. Shemet says, do not eat them from those that chew their cud because they're not split hooves. If it doesn't have either sign. Kufayin Gimel, so dog tummy not to eat unkosher fish. Shemet says, some of the should be disgusting for you, not eat from their flesh. Kufayin Dal, if tummy do not eat unkosher birds, right? You know, the guy sends his mother expensive parrots from $1,000 parrot from France or from Africa, right? And he asks, he comes back, Ma, what do you think about the gift I gave you? Oh, the chicken, it was delicious. Shemet says, but it wouldn't be quiet, something like that. He kept complaining when I put him in the pot. He's like, okay. A guy calls the KGB, 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to report a missing parrot. Calling the KGB headquarters at 3 o'clock in the morning, missing parrot. Call local police. No, I want to call you first and tell you I don't agree with anything my parent says. Okay, if these you should be disgusted by the bird, not kosher birds. Yeah. Oif Tommy is a non-kosher bird. Sheretz Oif is basically, is creepy crawling things that fly, like bugs, flies. Shemet says, call Sheretz Oif, Tommy Lechem, any creepy crawling flying thing, creepy crawler of the flying insect. It's Tommy for you. Go find over Sheretz Oif, don't eat creepy crawlers, bugs of the earth. Shemet says, Bechol Sheretz Oif, anything that creeps in the earth is disgusting. Go find Zayin Shlechol, Shemet Oif, don't eat that which breeds on the earth. That's like more like with bugs and different types of things that swarm on the earth based on whether or not they degenerated spontaneously from the fruit, and then they creeped on the earth afterwards. Well, that's the difference between Remes Aretz and Sheretz Aretz. We'll see in Sefer, in Kachim. Kedusha. Shemet says, do not pollute your soul with that which crawls. Do not eat that which crawls, that which the bugs of the fruits. After, if you know for sure that it generated on the fruit after it was picked, in which case, while it's still in the fruit, it's not a problem. Then it crawls afterwards out into the earth. That's a problem. It says anything which crawls. Don't eat that which the bugs of the water. It says do not disgust your souls with that which crawls. Don't eat an animal with dust, even a kosher animal, a cow. Yeah, if it's a carcass, don't eat it because what's a shech? Hashem says don't eat an animal which is teifa, even shechted correctly. But if the shechita does not only caused the death because it was also going to die anyways within the year because it was sick or injured, as a treifa is. That's also Shem. It says, flesh torn in the field, do not eat. Do not eat living from live animal. Shem says, do not eat the flesh with the soul with the flesh. Do not eat the sciatic nerve. Shem says, therefore, because therefore the Bnei Yisrael don't eat the sciatic nerve. Do not eat blood because the pasuk says don't eat any blood. How much? One place says a kazayas, one place says a revius, right? It's a do not eat forbidden fat. It says any forbidden fats of a domesticated animal you may not eat. Do not cook milk with meat. It says do not cook a young domesticated animal in its mother's milk. Or any domesticated animal in any milk. Not eat milk with that's been cooked with meat. It says second time. Pasuk says 2 times. Once to forbid eating it, once to forbid cooking it and eating it. Why the third time according to the Rambam? We'll learn. According to the Rambam doesn't say hana, right? That's the famous. Do not eat the flesh of a shur which has been stoned. Meaning, even if instead of stoning it, you stole it from the bezin and shechted it, you still can't eat it. It says don't eat flesh. And if in the event that it was stoned, besides being an avela, there's also the isser of this isser. Not to eat bread that's made from grain of the new crop before you bring the carbon aimer. The bisman abayis there to sell. Or according to the Rambam, could be even roasted grain. There's three different isurim from the same harvest of grain before the carbon has been brought, right? So your matzahs on the first night of Pesach, if they are from the new grain that's not from this year before the carbon is brought, it's a problem. Okay, so that's if it's bread, even if it's unleavened bread, roasted grain, caramel, fresh grain that's not roasted, again from the same Isser from the new crop, before Pesach, meaning before the carbon aimer. Basically, it says Pesach. It means basically the second day of Pesach when the carbon was brought. Shemet says, "Do not eat fresh grain." Do not eat the tree, which is the fruit, which is orla, meaning the first 3 years of the tree's life. Shemet says, "For 3 years it should be blocked off for you. Do not eat it." Do not eat grapes from a vineyard which has other produce growing together with it. Shemet says, lest you basically mekadesh, which in this case means negative, you basically forbid the fullness of the growing of the seed that you grow together with the vineyard. Who is that's the issue of eating that, besides the issue of causing the mixture, the issue of eating the mixture. Kuf tzadik dal shalishas yain esch, not to drink wine that's been, or to consume wine that's been poured for avodah zara. Shemet says that's the fatness of their karbanos they eat, and they drank the wine of the libations. That is that issue of drinking that kind of wine. Kuf tzadik hey in general, not eating in a gluttonous, drunken fashion. It says the parents say our child is a veldachaya. Now in Hilchas Mamrim, when it says the issue of doing this, the Rambam says you're not allowed to eat in this way. Which pasuk? Lo yiseichel al hadam. Here he brings this pasuk. Okay, not to eat on Yom Kippur. It says any soul does not afflict themselves, etc. It says don't eat a mixture of chametz if it's a kazayas per 8 kazayas in machilas process we call Shem. It says not any mixture of chametz. Not to eat chametz. Special lav of a besides the chametz on Pesach. The separate lav not to eat chametz erev Pesach after midday. Shem. It says chametz on it on the current Pesach. Do not have chametz seen by you. Mean don't own chametz. Shem. It says any chametz or leaven may not be seen by you. No leaven can be found by you. Shem. It says leaven may not be found in your house. The Nazir may not drink wine. Any wine mixture with taste if the wine has taste. It has wine taste. Shemet says even any soaking of grapes. Even the wine becomes vinegar. Anything which wine gets mixed in, it's also love. It's also on the Nazir. Shemet says vinegar of wine, vinegar of hard drink. May not drink. The Nazir is not allowed to eat grapes. Excuse me. Shemet says enough. What do you mean wet grapes as opposed to raisins? You're not allowed to eat raisins either. It's separate lav. Shemet says he can't eat dried grapes. He can't eat grape seeds. Or grape skins, excuse me. Yeah, grape seeds. It says from the grape skins, the grape seeds. The grape skins, seeds, grape skins. He cannot eat. He cannot eat grape peels, grape skins. A Nazir may not become tamei corpse tumah. It says even for his parent he may not become tamei. So he cannot go into the structure where a mace exists. It says by us it says I'll call nafshois mace liyove. So the pasuk's lashon is al nefesh mace liyove. Okay, anyway, so that's the lashon. The Nazir may not take a haircut. It says raise him not past his head. A person may not cut his entire field. Rather, he must leave a corner over. Right? It says so do not completely cut the edge of your field. Do not completely cut the edge of your field. A person harvests and there's certain single stalks that fall. You have to leave for the poor. You can't collect it. Shem, it says do not gather the leket of your harvest. Not to harvest the underdeveloped clusters of grapes, to leave those underdeveloped misshapen clusters to the poor. Shem, it says do not be do not take these clusters from your vineyard. Do not collect the parrot. Parrot is a single berries of grapes that drop. It's like leket is to grain, its parrot is to vineyard. Shem, it says, do not collect these droppings of grapes. If you forget a bundle of in the field, you now go back to get it. Shem, it says, you do not go back and take it. That's not just true of grain, it's true of all trees. It's also constant. It says, do not go back and harvest behind you, don't reharvest. Do not plant a mixture of seeds, even if you're not going to eat it. Shem, it says, do not plant your field kalayim. Do not plant specifically grain or vegetables in a vineyard, besides the issue of planting separate species. Special law when it comes to vineyard. Shem, it says, do not plant your vineyard mixed species. You're not allowed to crossbreed animals. It says, not crossbreed your animals. You now have two different types of animals do work together. Like have a donkey and a cow pull your horse, your wagon. It says, do not thresh, do not plow with a ox and a donkey together. Okay, let's Ratio test not to muzzle an animal while it's doing work. If it's doing work, it's something which could eat from and benefit from, as opposed to if it's doing with rocks or something or poison. Shemet says this do not muzzle an animal it's threshing. Is not to work the ground, the land during Shemitah. Shemet says not plant your field. Not to work the trees during Shemitah. Shemet says don't prune your vineyard. Not to harvest during Shemitah the way you do any year in terms of a personal property. Rather harvest as needed to eat for yourself, but not more than anybody else. Even land belongs to you, but the fruit is public. Shemet says do not harvest that which grows on its own. Not to collect the produce of the trees as you would every year as the owner. Shenemet says, and don't collect the grapes as in a regular way in the terms of harvesting the grapes. Yeah, all this will be said you're now doing Shemitah. You can't do during Yovel either, trees or land. Shemet says, do not plant it, do not work it. Do not basically harvest the overgrowth, that which goes by itself. Even though you didn't plant it, it happened by itself. Still, you can't harvest it as the owner, only as much as you need. As you would any of your Shemet says, do not collect its overgrowth. Don't harvest its crops that grow on its own. Don't collect the produce of Yavel as you would every other year. It says, do not gather the grapes that as Nizirah, that which is removed from you. Nizir, Mazim Elashin, that which is removed from you. You're not allowed to see yourself as the owner. The land and soil cannot be sold eternally, only till Yovel. Shemet says, the land may not be sold eternally, permanently. Not to change. In other words, when you have the Levim have their special cities and different areas in the cities are for those purposes, you're not allowed to change what the purpose is, the living area from the outside of the city area. Shemet says, and the field, the outside of the field, the outskirts of the city. You're not allowed to change it. In other words, you have the area in the city where you live, the outskirts where there's for the beauty of the city. You can't designate different parts for different purposes. You're not to forsake the Levi. Shemet says, lest you forsake the Levi. Specifically, I don't give them their matanas, the part that go to them, Meiser, etc., Meiser Rishon. Not to demand payment for a loan that Shemitah, the end of Shemitah comes and it's still not been repaid. Shemet says, do not press your fellow. Because of this issue of the loan being voided, you're not allowed to use that as an excuse not to lend money. Whenever it says in the pasuk Yishamer, pen or al, lest, etc., any elements, let's say, it's a rule of thumb, that's what it's say. But generally speaking, not to just allow to refrain from lending a poor person money and give you what he needs. Do not harden your heart. Nimsa turns out. This is interesting whether Ram says this shir over your dust. A person who gives tzedakah is doing a positive mitzvah. If you refrain from giving tzedakah, besides not doing that, say is also doing this. I say, okay, interesting emphasis. The Ivri goes free. You have to give him a severance package. You can't let him give him nothing. Shemet says, leave him empty. No, Bechlal is the mitzvah of Oh, according to okay, I'm not sure. A person is poor, has no money to repay back, ask him just to harass him. You're not allowed to. So you have to pay him. It says, not be a creditor to him. Do not lend a Jewish person interest. It says, do not give your money with interest. Not to borrow on interest from another Jew. It says, do not give interest to your brother. It means the borrower should not give interest to the lender. Don't be a character or participant in any of this business transaction, buyer and lender, when it comes to interest. Don't be a guarantor, don't be a witness, don't write the contract with him. Shemet says, do not place interest upon him. Do not delay paying your employees. Do not take a collateral by force. If you do take collateral in the correct way, you have to not refrain from giving it back to him when he needs it. Shemet says, do not lie down with his pajamas. You have to give it back to him. Do not lie down while his blanket is by you. If it's a night garment, give it back to him at night. Do not take a collateral from a widow. Shemet says, do not take collateral the garment of a widow. Never take a collateral if it's an item which is needed for making food. Yeah? A blender. You're not allowed to take a Shem. It says, do not take as a collateral a grinder or different types of grinders. No kidnapping. Shem, it says, human trafficking is not allowed. Shem, it says, do not steal. This is the Session Dibris, referencing stealing people. Also, you're not allowed to steal money. Shem, it says, different pasuk. This pasuk references stealing money.